Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Sometimes when we hear about the climate crisis, we can feel a sense of hopelessness. As a result, our anxieties can spike, and there's even a term for it, eco-anxiety. One thing I've learned about anxiety, eco-anxiety or other forms of it, is that the more we avoid doing the thing that makes us anxious, the more the anxiety increases. If you're asking, what can I do about the environment and my own eco-anxiety, then this episode is for you. 2 years ago, I hosted Heather White, a licensed attorney and the author of One Green Thing, on this podcast, and we geeked out to the topic of eco-anxiety. She's returning with her new book, 60 Days to a Greener Life, Ease Eco-Anxiety Through Joyful Daily Action. I love this book for many reasons, but one of which is because it acknowledges that despite the crisis, we must live our lives and that we can't do all the things, but we can do some things. And the book shares small daily exercises that are easy and actionable that leverage our personal strengths, allowing each of us to lead from those strengths to improve the health of the planet. When we do these things alone, it may seem like not much will affect change of the state of the planet. But when we do this collectively, as Heather suggests, the outcome can be quite different. By the way, another person who loved this book was someone I know you've heard of, Erin Brockovich. She said, "I call Heather the Brené Brown of the environment movement because she makes environmental action personal, doable, and joyful." So listen in as Heather talks about 60 days to a greener life. Heather White, a hearty welcome back to Super Psyched.
Thank you so much, Adam. It is a thrill to be with you again.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I was so happy. Any excuse would be a good reason for you and me to talk again, but you just put out a second book. I mean, you are prolific. You're using your natural resource known as willpower, energy, and all of the kind of, jet fuel it requires, and without harming the planet, to assist people in this overwhelm. One of the things that happens in our autonomic nervous systems, if I can geek out for a second, as I often do, is we can enter a state of overwhelm, that fight, flight, freeze. And it's the freeze one that you seem to be addressing the most. Like, don't freeze. I don't care about your political party. I don't care about your beliefs, even about the climate. Right. Let's do the right thing. It's not all that hard. It may be an inconvenient truth, but it doesn't have to be all that inconvenient. And you break down just how we can do it with 60 days of implementing new habits. I think 60 days for a greener life, it's nice and short. It is very clear about the why of what we should be doing and what we can do. Let's talk about the book and just what propelled you to create this one.
Well, thank you, Adam. And I am so grateful for all of your work. And there is a lot of psychology behind this book and behind what we're trying to achieve in the climate movement. As individual behavior change is not easy. We know that as individuals, but you know that more than most, given your background and all of your work. And one of the things we find in climate is exactly what you just said, the freeze response. The more you learn about water quality, species extinction, the challenges with energy, the fact that the people who've contributed the least amount of carbon pollution are suffering the most. That's called climate justice. Once you start thinking about that racially, you think about it economically, you think about it globally with the global north and the global south and the impacts that they have from climate change. And you think about it intergenerationally, it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. And so the reason I wrote this book was to try to provide people a way in. It is like a daily devotional. It's a day reader. So every chapter is a day. You mentioned that it's short. Every entry is 450 or 500 words. And as an author yourself, that's actually quite hard. I'm a lawyer by training. So putting out the words is not a problem, but editing it down is always a challenge for someone with my background. And the idea is that every day you have a prompt or a QR code where you can take action that day, 15 minutes a day. And it's not because Heather White or Adam Dorsey are going to solve the climate crisis by reflecting on your climate why or deciding to switch to a sustainable green cleaner. That's not why. The why is because the more that we do each day, and if we have this daily intentional practice, the more likely we are to shift the culture. And we need that culture change for these big systemic solutions to work.
Could not agree more. The idea of having bite-sized pieces to address behavior change, to address denial that we might have, other blockers such as procrastination. I was really taken by the movie Don't Look Up, where sure, we could decide not to look at this. It's still going to happen.
Right.
Whether you believe it, no matter what, if you have human DNA and you live on this planet, this is happening. There's a preponderance, I'm using that word to a lawyer. There's a preponderance of evidence that this is happening. And you're saying that we have about a 6-year window to get it together.
Yes. And I would say it's, to use the lawyer term, beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a 99% scientific certainty that global warming is happening, and it's caused primarily by human activity from our energy choices, burning fossil fuels. It is. And just like you said, Adam, it doesn't really matter whether or not you believe it. It is happening. It's a little like gravity. The window is short. And that also comes from the United Nations, this 2030 deadline, so to speak. 6 years is not a lot of time to have the systemic changes that we need about how we get our energy, how we organize ourselves, how we deal with our food waste, how we connect with community too. It's a short window. That said, we've done really big things before, and there has been a lot of progress. It may not feel like it, but we have seen significant progress.
That's really hopeful. Actually, let's talk about that for a minute, because many of us just hear about these just ginormous Texas-sized floating pieces of garbage that are polluting our oceans. And when we hear about something like that, we just say to ourselves, kind of what I said at the Warriors game, the very last one, like in the early fourth quarter, I just looked at my son and said, game over. And my son said something that you would say back. And he said, Dad, if you're going to think like that, leave the room. And I was like, you're right.
Yes.
Ben. You're 100% right. Thank you for enlightening me. Of course, they did end up losing, but they could have won, possibly,
right,
if they've gotten it together.
Right.
And you're stating that there is some good news in addition to this horror that is transpiring, whether we're aware of it or not. What is some of the, just to provide some hope, what is some of the good news that might actually assist people in doing the 60 days and provide them with wind at their back?
Oh, that's such a great question, because as much as I say that individual action drives this important culture change and can help you manage your eco anxiety, what's happening at the national and global level can bring that wind at the back. So you can see it's not individual action, because individuals didn't cause this crisis. Oil and gas companies, fossil fuel industry did, but we are all part of the solution. So it's not individual action versus collective action. It's both. We need both. And so big changes we've seen is the Inflation Reduction Act here in the United States. The IRA is what the term that policy wonks like me use. And Adam, you would say the psychology of that is not good. I know that's a whole nother podcast. We can talk about messaging. It's historic. $400 to $600 billion invested in climate solutions over the next 2 years, including clean energy tax credits for companies to convert their entire fleet to electric vehicles, money for EV infrastructure across the United States, money for high-speed rail. Instead of the Civilian Conservation Corps, I think many of us may know grandparents who had connected or know about the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression. There's now a new Climate Conservation Corps where they're hiring 2,000 young people starting this summer to do climate restoration work across the United States. And there's also incredible amount of investments that are being made in clean energy research and technology. So the Inflation Reduction Act is real. It's a job creator. It shows that the clean energy economy is here. It's very positive. There needs to be a lot better PR, Adam. That's a whole nother conversation.
Like we need that idea.
We need to see pictures of ribbon cuttings, as facilities make the transition to EV vehicles, or if they decide to become 100% powered by clean energy. But there's all of this progress, and we need to do a better job of the good news. But I feel like a big takeaway for a lot of people is understanding that as big as the threat of climate is, the sustainability economy is about to explode. You mentioned the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and all this plastic. And from The Graduate, we of course remember the line plastics, plastic sun.
I think about that nearly every day.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And here we are, right? But I think for the future now, it's sustainability, whether it's clean energy, whether it's looking at nature as a climate solution. Every job is a climate job. All kinds of great opportunities ahead for us.
I'm so glad you're talking about this. And I think if you're going to write a third book, I would want, here I am suggesting your next book, but it would be about what is actually happening so that we can actually feel like we're playing a part in this orchestra and that we're not just Horton the elephant doing it alone, going through rain and, an elephant is true 100% and going through all, like for us to feel like we're doing it alone rather than
Yes.
I'm thinking about as a contrast, the greatest generation, as they are called, were working in concert, knowing that they were part of an orchestra. That they were not just doing this alone. They were contributing to an important cause, and that is to not lose the world to oppressive regimes. We've lost that unity. We need that sense of like, I don't care what you're into in life, politically or religious backgrounds, any other SES demographic information. We're all working together. Each of us is playing a different part. And one of the things that made me so happy about your last book, and you actually kind of bring it back into this one, is use your strengths.
Yes.
Don't do something that is not yours. It's almost as if you're saying, hey, we are an orchestra. We got a bassoon over here. We've got the rhythm section over here. And we've got the strings over here. Who are you? Which role do you... Even just playing the triangle is a very important piece.
Yes, it is.
Do your part. Let's talk about that for a moment.
I love that analogy of the orchestra. I think it's really important. And spoiler alert, especially for folks who like fiction, this is a nonfiction book. Day 60 is to find your service superpower. So there, I told you what day 60 is. It's your greener life.
That's your close.
That's my close. It's to find your service superpower, which is an assessment I have on the nonprofit I started. It's at onegreenthing.org, where you take a 5-minute assessment, kind of like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or Strength Finders, and you find out, what are your strengths in service? How do you want to show up for the people you love? And that definitely gets to this analogy that you're talking about, Adam, of the orchestra. Everyone has a unique role. There's 7 different archetypes. Not everybody's going to be the beacon. I think a lot of people, when they think climate activists, they think beacon. They think a person who's testifying before Congress or organizing a group of folks to go advocate for community composting. But that's not everybody's style, right? And so when one of my friends found out after the assessment that she was a philanthropist, which is the person who shows up by donating their time and their resources to the environmental movement, she said, wait, I can throw a party? And I'm like, yeah, you can throw a party for a local land trust and see if you can raise $5,000 or organize a community garden day for your kid's school. That is really valuable. Welcome to the environmental movement, right? So we all have a different role that we can play. But I think this most important thing that you talked about is that we have to know we can't go it alone. Ultimately, climate action is about compassion. And it's about community connection. And with this chronic loneliness that so many people are experiencing, especially young people, I write about that in both of the books, the loneliness epidemic that young people especially are feeling, we need that connection. And so one of the things that inspired me to write this book was taking 15 minutes each day to have this intentional practice of sustainability is a way for you to connect with yourself, but also there's concrete ways to connect to community through this so we can feel like we're all connected. And as far as the third book, yes, I have that concept, Adam, just that you outlined, which is so funny. Talk about a brain meld that we have is so people can see what's ahead, the excitement that's ahead, the clean energy greener, healthier, more just world that we can create, because we've done a good job in the environmental movement of letting people understand the threats, right? Even if some people have the freeze response or in denial. We don't know if there'll be zombies in the apocalypse, but I think everybody can picture an apocalypse pretty well. But what about the alternative? What if we do fix this in 6 years? What does it look like? We could build something really beautiful that future generations could be proud of if we had rooftop gardens everywhere, solar panels everywhere, if we had clean energy, fuel, mass transportation. It could be really exciting and beautiful. And I want to put a lot of energy into that conversation too.
I love that. And all of us have within us an inner critic, this little kind of peanut gallery voice that says, you suck and what you're doing is kind of dumb. And I have heard very smart comedians skewer, clown on certain efforts like bike rides for a cause or Cancer Awareness Day at a baseball game. I can understand, and their jokes are funny, but they could be potentially toxic because a Cancer Awareness Day at a baseball game could actually cause 1% of the attendees to do something outside of the game and say, you know what, that's important. I did the AIDS ride 3 years in a row. It's a California AIDS ride. It's this bike ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and it's so much fun. And yeah, we were raising money for curing AIDS and treating people with HIV and other complications related to it. And I needed to get in shape. So it was like a perfect
win-win
influence for me. And I also, unbeknownst to me, was jonesing for community. And I met the coolest people on this ride. And your idea of community, like we have lost that. Bowling alone is a testament to the idea that we used to,
Bowling alone is such a great analogy.
You know that book, Bowling Alone?
I don't know that book. Oh my gosh, that's such a great name for a book.
There was a time when we were all Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble and out there bowling together no matter what.
My grandparents were huge bowlers. My father-in-law won bowling trophies.
Totally. So instead of sitting at home and watching Netflix and being on our devices, we were out there at Elks Clubs and other social service organizations like Rotary. All walks of life were getting together, and I think we were better for it. And now we are lonelier than ever. And I actually believe that coming together with a common enemy, and that enemy being this actual threat, and saying, we're going to go kick your ass and make everything good for future generations. That is a way that all of us can come together under, as you were just saying, throwing a party for a particular local cause or any other way that we can get people together to explore their strengths and their contributions. They may seem ostensibly a little corny. Yeah, lean into it.
Let's talk about the corniness, because I get that a lot. Middle-aged mom out to dinner with my kids and my teenagers, my Gen Z teenagers. No straws, please. Like when I say that, you can imagine the eye roll, Adam, right?
In Bozeman, Montana.
Let me just slow clap for you, Mom. Mm-hmm. You've solved the plastic pollution crisis. You've solved it all by skipping that straw. But it does start a conversation because, of course, I didn't solve the climate crisis, but I am sending a signal to the barista that's not a value. Maybe they want to ask for compostable straws, or do they really need straws? And because individuals like me around the world said, I'm concerned about single-use plastic. I'm concerned about the plastic showing up on our beaches. It's in our bodies. We're eating about a credit card size worth of plastic each week. I'm sick of that. Because of all these individuals taking action, there's now collective action. And the United Nations is considering a multilateral treaty to deal with single-use plastic. Now, there's all kinds of complications. Of course, the industry wants long-term phase out and design and all kinds of things in the details. But the fact is that this conversation wouldn't have happened if individuals around the world hadn't taken action. And so the corniness is true. It is corny. But you also have to exercise agency, especially when you're dealing with the anxiety of what the global warming will bring to us. And it is bringing to us with all these extreme weather events that we're experiencing and will continue to experience if we don't have these big changes. So exercising agency, even if it's corny, understanding your role in shifting the culture, doing what you can and connecting through community to take collective action is the only way we're going to get where we need to go.
If you think about it also, I shave every day, and it takes about 2 minutes
Right.
to shave every day. That comes out to 730 minutes a year. 730 minutes, if you look at it, are basically 12 hours and 10 minutes I spend shaving every year.
Yes.
And over 10 years, that comes out to 120 hours.
Right.
I've been shaving for 5 days of those 10 years. Now, the reason I bring that up is little things seem very little, but they can actually add up to become a lot.
Exactly.
That little straw pushback is, yes, it will be used by someone else at some point, probably within minutes that evening. And so your daughter's slow clap and eye roll is hilarious. And it's the awareness. It's like, what if all 300 million of us in the United States did that?
No, it's so true. It's so true. And I think that important point of understanding the compound interest, so to speak, of your small actions makes me think of James Clear, Atomic Habits. And Atomic Habits, I mentioned in both of the books, and it really did inspire me in a way. This idea of this daily practice of sustainability, this one green thing, is green atomic habits, because not only does it make you feel better, over time, it compounds. And there's peer-reviewed scientific literature and an analysis of Project Drawdown, which is a great nonprofit resource on climate solutions, that says that if individual and household actions, these small actions of becoming more energy efficient, of reducing food waste, of moving to more plant-rich diets, these small actions could reduce global carbon emissions by 25%. So to your point, if we all do it, the math matters. But what I'm trying to do is separate this idea of an individual carbon footprint, which was created by the oil and gas companies. PR execs from the oil and gas companies came up with this idea of an individual carbon calculator to try to shift the burden of this problem onto us as individuals. That's not what 60 Days to Greener Life is all about. 60 Days to Greener Life is all about how we didn't create the problem, but we're part of the solution. Exercise agency, ease your anxiety over the future, and create this shift that you were talking about, this compounding of all these small actions if we all do it.
So I took great notice of the idea that we are consuming a credit card's size worth of plastics per week. And I shared that last night with a friend of mine, and he was incredulous. That is mind-blowing and shareable and creepy.
I'm sorry, it's very creepy.
So it's very creepy. To echo that and ask ourselves, like, what are we doing? And it was funny because I had just heard that stat a few days ago. Yesterday, I was at a business and they offered me a bottle of water in a plastic container. I said, yeah, no thanks. How much plastic actually exists in one of those bottles? Do you have a sense of that, first off?
Well, I don't know exactly how much plastic exists in those bottles. I mean, it's a plastic bottle, and I know that plastic pollution and plastic bottles are a large contributor of the plastic pollution that we see globally. Plastic water bottles are. So what you want to do is have filtered tap water and a reusable bottle. That's that simple. But it's all about progress, not perfection, right? Like one of my good friends, Erin Brockovich, who wrote the foreword to my first book, One Green Thing. I see your reusable bottle, by the way, Adam, which is awesome. But my friend, Erin Brockovich, who wrote the foreword to One Green Thing, she was saying that someone kind of called her out of drinking bottled water on a plane. And she was like, what am I supposed to do? Drink out of the bathroom? The bathroom faucet on the plane? I mean, if you forget your reusable bottle, it's okay. Like in emergencies, we have to have plastic water bottles. It's okay. But we can make those small shifts and it makes a big difference. I think also one thing, Adam, that I think is important for us to understand, and that is this disposable culture we have where we throw away water bottles. We think we're recycling, but only 9% of plastics is recycled. That's a whole nother conversation. But this disposable culture, throwing away our forks, throwing away our paper plates, we had to learn that as a culture. Plastic was invented in 1951. There were huge ad campaigns that would tell you how to throw things away. It is a learned behavior. We can learn the opposite. We can learn how to have a circular economy. We can ask our brands to think about when they're designing something, how it's going to be disposed of and being responsible for that disposal, not the consumer to be responsible for the disposal. There are ways that we can switch that behavior because we did it to learn how to use plastic and to learn how to throw it away.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about the macro and the micro.
Mhm.
The macro would be systems from larger parties that help us do the right thing easily. Like Thaler and Sunstein write about in their book, Nudge. These are two University of Chicago economics professors. And they talk about the idea like on the California driver's license, you are a donor unless you opt out. And
Yes.
so they make it easy for the masses to do the right thing. I find myself wondering about the macro. I also find myself thinking about the micro as you're talking. And I love that you mentioned progress, not perfection, because I will be flying on an airplane and I will be drinking out of a plastic bottle of water because I can't bring my own in. I do not want to drink the sink water from a bathroom. That sounds really disgusting.
The airplane bathroom.
Thank you. No, thanks. And I do know that there are sometimes in some airports, there are refillable stations,
Right.
but I get very dehydrated on planes, like because I'm human. And I think everyone on the plane is getting dehydrated at probably around the same rate. It's just a very dehydrating experience. So I walk on armed and dangerous with a lot. So cognitive flexibility, which is a hallmark of psychological wellness, versus cognitive rigidity, which is a sign of pathology, that willingness to say, you know what, in certain contexts, I'm going to do this because that is what is available. But on average, or for the lion's share of days, I'm doing the other thing. So I love that you call that out. I'm wondering, since we've spoken about the micro a little bit, if we go to the macro, if larger bodies, if we were able to advocate for governmental assistance, regardless of party affiliation, what would you be saying we should ask for to make it easier for society to do the right thing?
Oh, such a great question. Quickly, I want to address this progress over perfection. I think a lot of people get stuck in the freeze response because they're afraid of doing sustainability wrong and they're afraid of being judged. Like they switch to a sustainable brand and then they find out the brand is actually greenwashing and it wasn't as sustainable as they thought it was going to be. Or they decide to fly and buy a carbon offset and then the offset company wasn't actually planting those mangroves in Baja like they said they were going to. So that gets people frustrated. And so one of the things I try to say is that intentionality matters with that larger culture shift. But your question, Adam, was about, okay, what types of system change do we need? We don't have community-wide composting. We're about to get it in Bozeman, Montana. I know it's something that in California, there was a law passed last year that requires composting and provides funding for cities to offer curbside composting. Huge opportunity to reduce food waste. 8% of global carbon emissions come from food waste. So if we can deal with food waste in homes and in restaurants, well, I just got back from London and there was a huge truck in front of a restaurant and it said Climate Resilience Department, Food Waste Recovery. And it was taking food waste from restaurants to compost them to facilities. That is a simple thing that can have huge impacts. I think the other thing, there's an act before Congress right now called the Break Free from Plastics Act. And it requires plastic manufacturers to be responsible for disposal and responsible for recycling. It also requires opportunities for the companies that design these products to support and pay for, and I'm not sure if it might be actually a tax. It may be a tax or some type of percentage that's required. It's probably a tax that they have to pay for local facilities to be able to recycle too. So this idea of cradle to grave, you're responsible if you design the product for the disposal of the product is really important. It's very simple, but that's really important. I also think that making sure that we have infrastructure for EV is key. I don't know if you know this. I think I've told you last time that eco-anxiety was first defined by the Oxford English Dictionary in September 2021. Eco-anxiety was defined that term. But so was battery anxiety. Battery anxiety is people who drive EVs that are stressed out about where their next charger is.
That's so good.
And so where can they go to charge their car? And there's all kinds of great apps out there, but we don't quite have the infrastructure. If we had an EV charging station everywhere we see a gas station, it would be a much different experience. And right now it's like a random collection of public libraries, or maybe you find a Target, go to a shopping mall where you can go charge. It's not convenient at all. And so that's just a great example of just 3 examples of what we can be doing at the systems level to make it easier to have that behavior change. But one of the things, I don't know if your listeners will remember this, but I think you do, Adam. People used to litter a lot. I remember growing up and being behind cars and seeing someone roll down their windows and throw out the Happy Meal.
Oh my God.
Just
I
throw out the Happy
totally
Meal.
grew up in that. I mean, you and I are the same age. I remember that so well.
I mean, it was just, and people didn't even think about it.
Not at all. Everybody did it. It wasn't just like,
everybody did it.
It wasn't just the stoners from high school. It was like everybody.
Just the stoners listening to Motley Crue. It wasn't
just the guys from the hair bands. That's right.
No, it wasn't. Everybody. It wasn't. It was everybody. And I think that we have seen a huge culture shift.
What a great reminder.
And we can do this. We can live a greener, healthier life. We can do this. And so it's all connected. And I think that this idea that I want people to leave with is that everyone is welcome and everyone is needed in this movement. Everyone has a unique role to play. Some people feel like, well, if I don't have a PhD like Adam, I can't be part of this movement. No, you don't have to have a PhD in anything to be part of the environmental movement. You just have to care about the future we're leaving the next generation. And when you were talking about this, I think the right word to describe where we are right now in politics in the United States, this partisanship, this fractured negative energy. One of the things I try to do in this book is just step aside from politics, although, of course, who you vote for is very important in determining our future and these systemic solutions that we need. I step away from that and ask you to think about an important person who's made the life you're living possible. There's an exercise in the book, whether it's a mentor, an ancestor, a friend, colleague, to think about why you care for them, why you appreciate them, how they helped you. And then I ask you to envision it's 2050 and you're sitting down with a teenager and you're related to them. You are their ancestor. And what are they going to thank you for? And what are they going to wish you had known? And I think that's an important context for us to put our individual behavior in, because just like you were talking about that compounding interest of shaving, right? Or skipping the straw, or riding your bike, or walking to work, or walking to the cafe, whatever, walking to the grocery store if you can, whatever. That compounding interest is working towards a greener future. Like the future isn't something that's predetermined. We are the architects of that future. What future are we designing for the next generation? I think that's an important grounding in what this daily practice means, this daily devotional.
So one of the things you talked about, and I'm just going to do a call back to the idea of behavior change, is hard.
Yeah.
And we are all at various stages of readiness for change. Many of us are in denial. Oh, it's not going to be a problem. Someone else will take care of it. I'm not ready yet. Some of us are in contemplation, and that's the next stage of readiness. Like, yeah, maybe, but not now. Some of us are in preparation. Like, okay, I'm prepared to do it. I'm still not doing it yet, but I have a date in mind for when I'm going to start. And then there's getting into action, getting into like, I'm now doing it. And it can be very hard to influence somebody to go from denial to action. To get from here to there is very, very, very hard. And it takes cognitive dissonance. The way I'm living is not consistent with my morals, my values. And the idea of imagining myself talking to my grandchild is one of the better ways to shift from denial into action. Like, oh,
right.
So whatever it takes, that may be a little too abstract for some people. They need something a little bit more of a punch in the gut. Could be watching Don't Look Up.
Yeah,
it's a really good gut punch of a movie. It could be a host of other things. Talking to people in environments where lead is in their water. I mean, you talk about what happens to underserved populations and how basically they live in the trash cans of our country. And they are absorbing all of that crap. And maybe finding out, like from I don't know if it would be an epidemiologist or someone who was able to opine intelligently about what's going on. People may shift and experience that cognitive dissonance. My favorite exemplar of someone who can instill cognitive dissonance better than anyone I've ever met is a fellow by the name of Daryl Davis. He is an African-American musician who attends KKK rallies and befriends members of the KKK and goes out for lunch and talks to them about their values. And what he finds is that their values are actually quite virtuous, except for the fact that they're not living those virtues. And he asks, so how is that being a good Christian? How is putting a burning cross on a fellow human's lawn, how is that consistent with the words of Christ? And they experience a cognitive dissonance. And he has over 200 robes from people who relinquished them because they realized that these hate groups were not for them. So if he's able to do that, let's think about ways. And, for the sake of time, we're not going to be able to explore all of them, but I want to kind of leave it as an open-ended question for how we can help people ask themselves, how is this behavior consistent with your values? Is this feeding you or bleeding you?
What an incredible story you just shared. Wow. I think having conversations that are value-based is important in the context of what does the future look like. It is abstract, but I think when we talk about the agency we have on our day-to-day, but also the agency in envisioning the future, I think it can be an exciting conversation. I would say that in my experience as an environmentalist, we've tried to have those types of conversations about the inconsistency, and it's fallen flat because it has come across, because it's very different apples and oranges. Environmental racism is a whole nother conversation that we should talk about. And maybe that is where we need to be putting most of our conversations.
Yes.
Maybe that's where we need to be doing it. But what we have been doing is we start the conversation with, you are personally doing everything wrong. You're living wrong. You're eating meat. You have a gas-fueled car. If you have a nice house, you have a nice house. It's too much of a house. It's a taking away of everything that's important to you is how many people perceive being an environmentalist, is a taking away, when in fact it's an adding to. This whole point of this book and this work that I do is that living a greener life is living a more joyful life because it's an intentional life. It's not based on stuff. It's based on community. It's based on your values of the future you want to create for the next generation. It's based on clean air, clean water, clean energy, and having access for everybody to have that. It's not a taking away from you. But I do think when we talk about environmental justice, environmental racism, climate justice is another term, it's important. One of the actions I have on environmental justice is just to Google Cancer Alley. You'll be surprised. I've been doing this work for so long. Like, I'm always shocked that people don't know the term Cancer Alley. And that's the term that's used in the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, where most of the petrochemical companies are based. High rates of cancer, asthma, all kinds of clusters of very rare forms of cancer and disease, mostly Black, Indigenous people of color who live along that coast. And they have been raising the alarm for at least 40 years now, saying this isn't fair. We need to make sure that the companies who are extracting from this earth are also giving back to the communities and not just in jobs, in a more sustainable sense. So I think that that's an opportunity for us to have those meaningful conversations. But I think the taking away versus the adding to, that you can have more meaning in your life as an environmentalist. You can have more joy in your life as an environmentalist. You can have more community and connection and be alignment with your real values, as opposed to, I'm coming for your F-150.
I've been pruning my Japanese maple tree, and I'm able to see it better by taking away certain branches that obfuscate the view. And one of the things that we can do, Alighty Klotz wrote a book about, it was called Subtract. He's a University of Virginia professor, brilliant man. And he basically talks about the idea of less is more. And I often think about these guitarists who have 1,000 guitars versus, say, Brian May from Queen, who has one guitar. He has the Brian May guitar. I would actually suspect, based on the research, particularly from Barry Schwartz, who talks about the paradox of choice and how more is not necessarily better. In fact, it can actually be a lot worse. Like having one awesome thing. I used to be kind of a watch head. Now I have one watch, and I'm so much happier with my one watch because I love this watch and this is going to be my watch. Brian May has his one guitar, and we might need a few for different sounds, but we probably don't need 1,000 because we're not going to actually play those 1,000 guitars. So
yes.
And last but not least, lest I let the listener think that on any level, envisioning us at 2050 is too abstract, I'd like to rescind that, if I may, Your Honor, because when we see something in our mind, very often our brains can't differentiate that this is not actually happening, and we can feel it right in our guts. Wow, how would I actually feel talking to my descendants? And if we really decide to close our eyes and see it in ideally 8K resolution and really try to feel the feels and see the images and hear the dialogue as loud as possible. Well, not injuring your ears, but hearing it loudly, we may not be able to differentiate between the reality or the imaginal. So I think this is a great place for us to close. And I would really encourage everyone to think about, how will you tell your story to your descendants? I think that is one of the better ideas I've heard. Less definitely can be more. We can all play a part. Perfection is not what we're going for. We're looking just for progress. Oh my gosh, Heather, it's funny to imagine that talking to a person about eco-anxiety could be so joyful, but speaking with you is utterly joyful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. I feel the same. And that's the goal, is living a greener life can bring more joy into your life.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe